Hello, everybody. This is the next lesson in our new chapter of social studies, chapter 4, lesson 2 here. And as you can see, it's called New People, New Jobs. And we're going to talk about immigrants, and we're going to talk about Indiana's population and jobs, and all that interesting stuff from the late 1800s after the Civil War. And if you look at the first picture here in your book, it's on page 96. Immigrant children from different cultures attended Indiana schools together in the early 1900s. In the late 1800s, people looking for work knew that Indiana was a great place to live. Business owners had built new factories and needed workers. The state's railroads, coal mines, gas and oil wells, and oil refineries were also hiring. Indiana was moving ahead. Changes in Indiana's population. Between 1860 and 1910, Indiana's population doubled. More than 1 million people lived in Indiana than before. Also, more Hoosiers lived in towns and cities. Before the Civil War, most Indiana residents lived in rural or country areas. They lived and worked on or near farms. Only a small number of Hoosiers lived in urban or city areas. That began to change. Starting in the 1870s, many Hoosiers left farms to take jobs in factories located in cities. They were joined by thousands of immigrants who arrived looking for work. In addition, many African American and white families from the South migrated to Indiana cities for jobs. To migrate means to move from one place to another. Immigrants in Indiana. Immigrants came to Indiana in two different waves, or periods of time. The first group arrived before the Civil War. They came mostly from England, Scotland, Ireland, and Germany. Some immigrants came for political reasons. The leaders of their countries were harsh. They did not have religious freedom. Others came for economic reasons. Many Irish and German farm families left Europe when their crops failed. In America, they could find cheap land and jobs. Other Irish and German immigrants came to help build canals and railroads in Indiana. A second wave of immigration began in the 1870s and 1880s. Many newcomers arrived from southern and eastern European countries such as Italy, Russia, Greece, and Poland. Some fled religious or political persecution. Like the first wave, many came for jobs and for better lives. Immigrants helped Indiana's economy by taking on jobs in some of the toughest workplaces. These included coal mines near Terre Haute, steel mills in northwest Indiana, and natural gas and oil wells in east central Indiana. They contributed to Indiana's culture with their native food, clothing, and songs. Most immigrants settled in urban areas near other people from their homelands and created their own organizations and churches. While many worked in factories, some immigrants opened businesses, such as grocery and clothing store. And if you look over here, this picture right here, guys, it says teenage boys work in an Indiana coal mine. How'd you like to do that, huh? Challenges in the cities. At the end of the 19th century, Indiana's cities grew quickly. Many factory owners moved to the state to take advantage of cheap and abundant fuel. The cities where these factories were located filled with new people. Cities in north and central Indiana grew the fastest. Those areas had the most railroad lines. In addition, a new type of electricity-powered streetcar connected Indiana cities with nearby towns. These streetcars made it possible for people to live in a town and work in a city. As a result, both the cities and nearby towns grew. Life in Indiana's growing cities could be exciting. It could also be hectic and even dangerous. In some city neighborhoods, people lived together in crowded buildings. Improving city life and solving problems required careful planning, hard work, and money. Residents looked to their city government leaders for help and agreed to pay taxes to fund new programs. One of the first challenges cities had to tackle was how to deal with fires. Most city buildings were made of wood. Fires spread quickly from one building to another. Early fire companies were made up of volunteers. Later, many cities hired and trained professional firefighters. Indianapolis started its paid fire department in 1859. The city soon purchased its first steam fire engine that shook and puffed as it raced toward a fire. The city also built a high tower on top of a building in the center of town. They paid a watchman to stand in the tower. When he spotted a fire, he would ring a bell to alert the fire department. Getting water to the cities was another challenge. At first, people hauled their own water from streams, wells, or canals. They often had to carry the water long distances. As cities grew, more people needed water closer to home. Cities and towns began hiring companies to pump water into cities. Unfortunately, the water was sometimes pumped from rivers into which sewers had drained. People often got sick from drinking dirty water. Cities also improved by paving muddy streets to make travel easier and safer. Cities hired people to sweep the streets and collect garbage. This greatly improved the health of those who lived in the cities. Lighting city streets at night also improved safety. In 1880, Wabash installed 4 electric lamps in the dome of its courthouse. It became the first city in the world to be lighted by electricity. Look at that. That's a horse-drawn fire engine. That's fascinating about Wabash being the first city in the world to be lighted by electricity. It's a little feather in our Indiana cap, huh? Improvements in education. As Indiana's population increased, state and local leaders began pushing for a system of public education. Public education means that a government provides schooling for all children. Indiana's first constitution in 1816 had called for creating public education in the state. However, no system had been developed. Some private schools did exist, but parents had to pay for their children to attend. Religious groups created and supported these schools. Some towns also had Sunday schools that focused especially on the poor. These schools provided instruction in both regular subjects and religious topics, 1 day a week for a few hours. In 1833, a New England teacher named Caleb Mills came to Indiana and established a school. Mills was a good teacher and a persuasive writer. Mills believed that Indiana needed to raise taxes to pay for more schools, teachers, and books. He wrote a series of letters in 1846 to 8 Indiana lawmakers. Mills pointed out that, according to census figures, Indiana children rank lower in literacy than children in many other states. Literacy is the ability to read and write. Mills's letter convinced many people that Indiana needed a better school system. However, it would take another 20 years before the state established a full-time public school system. Not all public schools were alike. The type of school a student went to often depended on where he or she lived. Students in rural areas usually attended a one-room school with all grades taught by one teacher. Students in urban areas attended schools divided into grades or divisions. Kind of like what we do now, huh? Public education in Indiana continued to improve at the beginning of the 20th century. William Wirt was the driving force behind many advancements. He served as superintendent of Gary's schools between 1907 and 1938. Gary was one of the state's fastest-growing cities. To accommodate more students, Wirt set up a system where he divided students into groups and had them move from room to room. They kept their books and papers in lockers. While some students attended classes in school subjects, others went to labs for science and gym for physical education. Wirt also made sure that Gary's schools offered classes and activities in music and art. Soon, Wirt's ideas spread to other schools in Indiana and around the country. Indiana's schools got a boost from several of the state's entrepreneurs, whom we read about in Lesson 1. The Ball brothers provided the state with land and buildings for a teacher's college in Muncie. That college is now called Ball State University. Madam C.J. Walker also made generous donations to improve education in the state. And here we see a picture of Madam C.J. Walker. She donated money to improve Indiana's schools. Remember, she was one of the first, actually the first millionaire African-American woman. All right, guys, so you're going to answer the questions that accompany this chapter, and they're attached to this seesaw activity.